Good morning. Welcome. I'm Rhonda Hooper, President and CEO of Jordan Advertising and the current chair of the Greater Oklahoma City Chamber. The Greater Oklahoma City Chamber organizes chamber forums for members who want to learn more about current issues in our region. And as Oklahoma City continues to grow, it becomes even more important than ever to invest in a long-term regional transit plan. Today's Chamber Forum will highlight the impact of public transportation on our infrastructure and future growth. But before we get into that, I'd like to take a moment to recognize today's signature sponsor, Cox Business. Please welcome Glenda Montiel, she's Enterprise Sales Manager for Cox Business, to the stage for a few words. Come on up, Glenda.
Thank you, Rhonda. So good morning. Welcome to the OKC Chamber Forum. I'm Glenda Montiel with Cox Business. I'm excited to participate in today's forum with our distinguished panel. Today is May 15th. As you know, we're right in the middle of storm season. So an opportune time for Cox to leave on your table an article concerning disaster recovery, cybersecurity, and business continuity. A few statistics for us business owners that we should prepare for. 40% of small companies never reopen following a major catastrophe. So think about just recent events here in the metro of flooding, damaging winds, hail, and wildfires. A company today really can't afford not to have a business continuity plan. Cybersecurity threats are real. Many of you may have heard about this previous Friday and over the weekend, a malware. People think malware is like a worm or something. It is. It's similar. It's a virus. It was called WannaCry. It attacked everything from small to very large business. You may have heard FedEx was actually even attacked. So 60% of small companies that suffer a cyber attack are out of business within 6 months. Think about that. That's a pretty sad statistic, more than half. So at Cox Business, we're fighting these attacks every day and partnering within our communities to help businesses like you by building disaster recovery and business continuity plans and mitigating your business risk. Thank you.
Weren't they looking for 300 Bitcoins to get your data back? They wanted more than that. Well, bottom line, you can never be too sure, never open a document from somebody you don't know, right? Okay. We'd also like to recognize our other sponsors. Our corporate sponsors are ADG Inc., Guernsey, and our host sponsor, Embassy Suites, Oklahoma City Downtown Medical Center. Let's say thank you to all of them. Unless you start with your sweets first, before we start our lunch and hear from our panel of speakers, I want you all to imagine, okay, I know this won't be very hard, but imagine your commute to and from work every day, as it currently is. You're going 65, and then all of a sudden you're down to a complete stop. And then you're inching, and then you get up to that part and you go, why was I stopped? Because guess what? A lot of people on the roads. Now, imagine that commute with an additional 453,000 people on the roads. Now, before you accuse me of exaggerating, I promise this is statistically based, that the number of people that our city is forecasted to add over the next 30 years, that's 453,000. But it's up to us as a DMA to be able to entice more people to the market so we could chance even double that. So while Oklahoma City's growth is an amazing thing, it brings a set of challenges, one of which is how we prepare for our infrastructure and transit capabilities to prepare for an increased demand. In Oklahoma City, leaders have been considering the modernization of our transit system for well over a decade. In 2005, the Association of Central Oklahoma Governments and the Central Oklahoma Transportation and Parking Authority released the area's first transportation study that set the stage for mass transit in our city. Called the 2030 Fixed Guideway Plan, the report identified ways that expand transportation options, improve air quality, and increase economic development. So instead of focusing on adding to our highway system or widening our roads, the report focused on improving bus transit systems and adding streetcar systems and commuter rail to what Oklahoma City already offers. Today, we are seeing more momentum on modernizing our transit than ever before. The MAPS 3 modern streetcar is under construction, and EMBARK has made new investments and improvements in its bus service. House 2480, which passed in 2014, allows regional transit authorities to draw tax boundaries, giving transit improvements a potential revenue stream. And in 2015, mayors from Del City, Edmond, Midwest City, Moore, Norman, and Oklahoma City pledged to participate in a task force that will create the area's Regional Transit Authority, RTA for short. Today, we're going to hear about what the next steps will be for this task force. But before we get to that, please enjoy your lunch. And I'll be back shortly to introduce our panelists. So lunch will be served. You can start with your sweets first. How's that? Right now, I'd like to introduce the panelists we have with us today. And our first panelist is Mayor Matt Dukes. Mayor Dukes was elected as mayor of Midwest City in 2016. Prior to his role, Mayor Dukes joined the Oklahoma Air National Guard and eventually became a Midwest City police officer. He was activated by the Air National Guard during Operation Enduring Freedom, serving as Air Guard liaison to the Security Force Director at Air Mobility Command. In 2008, as a Chief Master Sergeant, Mayor Dukes retired from the Oklahoma Air National Guard with 30 years of service, receiving numerous awards and commendations. He retired from the police department in November 2015 after 31 years of service. So you better stay in line or Mayor Dukes might get you. Please let me welcome. Kind of tiny squeeze in there, isn't it? Next to the stage is Jason Ferbrache. Jason serves as the director of the City of Oklahoma City's Public Transportation and Parking Department. Prior to his role, he held management positions in the private sector, including 6 years working in transportation and logistics. During his tenure with the city, beginning in 2005, he served as the Deputy Budget Director, providing general oversight for the city's operating expenditure budget and directing the city's strategic business planning and performance management process. He serves on the Oklahoma Transportation Authority Board and is on several smaller boards and committees related to transportation. Jason Ferbrache. I feel like I'm, okay. Next is Mayor Charles Lamb. Mayor Lamb was elected as mayor of the city of Edmond in 2011. Prior to his role, he was a housing consultant and worked with the Department of Housing and Urban Development. He has a combined 20 years of elected service to Edmond, first as a council member and now as mayor, with a commitment to maintain Edmond's quality of life and its progressive momentum into the future. He has been inducted into numerous halls of fame and received numerous awards, such as the Edmond Chamber Community Spirit Award for his lifelong dedication and service to the city of Edmond. Help me welcome Mayor Lamb. And lastly, but not least, John M. Sharp. You'll have to tell us what M stands for, has served as Director of the Transportation Planning and Services Division at the Association of Central Oklahoma Governments, or ACOG for short, since 2016. Prior to his role as director, Sharp received a master's degree in regional and city planning from the University of Oklahoma and joined ACOG in 1979. He oversees a number of programs, projects, and planning functions that receive local, state, and federal funding, such as the Ozone Alert Day program, congestion management, Unified Planning Work Program, and more. As a member of ACOG's executive staff, he also collaborates with executive leadership on the Regional Transit Authority, RTA, Task Force. Please help me welcome Mr. John M. Sharp. Okay, we have a few questions to ask. And what does M stand for?
Okay, I'll give you an answer. It's Martin.
Oh, Martin, that's a great name. Okay, am I live now? Okay. Now really don't talk because they'll hear. Okay. I'm going to make this really easy, and I'm going to direct them to specific individuals. If you want to weigh in on somebody else's question, you must ask Mother May I, okay? All right. John, this is your first up, okay? Oklahoma City is expected to grow by 453,000 in the next 30 years. How is the current and anticipated growth rate affecting traffic congestion, as we all know? And why can't we just build more highways or expand the ones we already have?
That's a good question. One of the concerns we have, we do a 30-year transportation plan for the region. And some of the numbers that we're seeing in regards to going forward, even though our population is growing at around 45%, our congestion is anticipated to be somewhere in the 55% range. So the congestion on the streets will actually increase faster than the population. Part of that is the number of trips that we do, number of work trips you do, and then associated trips to other things after work. But that's a real concern for us because there's limited funds in order to fix some of these things. One of the things that we've seen over time is that our budget for this next plan is something like $10 billion. And about 50% of that budget is based on just maintaining what we've got. So it's not widening streets necessarily or adding new lanes, but it's actually maintaining the streets that we currently have. So that's kind of over the horizon for all of our cities and communities to look out for. And one of the things that we've been told recently by ODOT is that going south to Norman, for example, is that there are some real limitations there in space. And it's very possible they will not be able to add additional lanes. So what you see is what you get going south to Norman. If any of you have gone that direction after work, you've noticed that it gets a little rough. And what's actually happened is the PM peak or the afternoon peak traffic is actually expanding. So it used to be about 2 hours, but it's now starting to sneak up to 2.5 hours. So there's never really a good time to sneak out of Oklahoma City and go back to Norman. Now, there are options on other interstates in the region for expansion. But as you know, as soon as we expand the streets, we tend to fill them. So that's why I think there's been a lot of discussion since 2005 or so that we really need to look at some other options, and a regional transit system or more enhanced regional transit system is one of those options.
Okay, thank you. As soon as you build them, they grow, right?
Yes.
Wow. Jason, I have the next question for you. The 2030 Fixed Guideway Plan was completed in 2005. What has it been implemented, and what has changed since then, and have the plans evolved at all?
Okay. Well, Rhonda, you did a great job explaining the Fixed Guideway Plan.
Do you think people listened?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
I absolutely think they listen. But as you stated, the Fixed Guideway Plan was an initiative led by COTPA, working with ACOG, other community partners, and it really just was a look at what could public transportation be in Oklahoma City. And so what could the system be? Well, it could be comprised of enhanced bus, commuter rail, bus rapid transit, and for downtown circulation, a streetcar system. And so the question, what has been implemented? Well, first of all, the modern streetcar. I'm sure most of us in this room hopefully are familiar with the fact that the $130 million MAPS 3 streetcar is currently under construction and on schedule to be opened at the end of December 18th. And that is a project that was identified back in that 2005 study as a means to get around downtown. And that streetcar is really, in my mind, going to totally change people's perception about how easy it is to get around downtown, the ease of travel once you're there. And for those that are down there on a daily basis, it's going to transform really the way they move from place to place. So the streetcar is certainly one of the big items. I mentioned enhanced bus. We've done a lot of improvements to the EMBARK bus system through the Central Oklahoma Transportation and Parking Authority, additional resources invested by the council. And so, we've done things like improved frequency to 30 minutes on almost all routes. We've added all kinds of real-time bus arrival technology. We've launched night service. We now have bus service until midnight, which we haven't had literally for decades in Oklahoma City. So we've done a lot of things to kind of shore up the foundation of the bus system, knowing that the plan actually called for an enhanced bus system down the road. Quickly, BRT also was mentioned in the the fixed guideway study. And we've actually done a conceptual plan on one of those BRT routes from Classen to Northwest Expressway.
Would you please tell everybody what that means instead of just the acronym?
Yes, absolutely. So BRT is Bus Rapid Transit. So think of Bus Rapid Transit as kind of a hybrid between an express route and light rail. So we continue to study that one Bus Rapid Transit route that was proposed. So the plan is still very viable. We've had some discussions with ACOG and some meetings, and we've kind of dusted it off and said, has anything changed? Is there anything different in our community that we need to account for? And we're still continuing to work that plan.
Jason, how about the bus ridership at night? Is it improving with people understanding that it's now a service?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, that is our fastest growing segment of our ridership right now, is that night service. FY17, which started a year ago, July, was our first full fiscal year of that night service, and we've seen gains each month since implementing it.
So ridership has a lot to do with understanding that it's going to be there at a certain time and you can rely on it.
Absolutely.
Cool. Okay. John, I'm going to lob another one back to you. ACOG's commuter corridor study was born out of the fixed guideway plan Jason just referenced. Can you give us some insight into the study and what has been implemented thus far?
Yes, and it really does go back quite a ways. The regional transit dialogue for the region started in 2009, so it really came after the fixed guideway study. And that was an opportunity for local communities, public sector folks. Mayor Cornett was our co-chair on that, and the chamber also. And a lot of folks getting together for the first time to really discuss this issue from a regional perspective. And the discussions were very helpful in regards to what to do next and how to bring everybody together and work on this. We also had something called RTD2, and it's not a Star Wars thing, but it was really, that was really the part where we handed over to the commuter corridor study and looked at how we could then get to a position where we knew which corridors would be the most effective early on. And obviously the three that really stood out were Edmond to downtown Oklahoma City to Norman, and then downtown Oklahoma City to east to Midwest City. And those routes, there was a lot of research, first of all. There was over $1 million study to look into what alignments should be between those particular places, because there's a lot of different options. Also looking at different ways of getting there. I think Jason just mentioned the BRT, so that could be on the street, or it could be a light rail or a commuter rail type system. So these were all looked at, and the kind of the handoff going forward was, how do we then create a regional authority to handle this? And you mentioned House Bill 2480, where Representative Joyner really helped us in regards to getting that forward, so we could actually possibly tax locally. We looked at 50 different options for taxing, or at least funding for the local options. And the two that came up the most were really sales tax and then possibly a property tax. And those tend to be fairly general throughout the country. So we've gone that way, and we're getting very close now. I don't want to get into some other questions that are coming up, but we'll catch on that a little later on.
Okay, appreciate it, John. All right, now I've got a question for our mayors. I think I'm going to put you first, Mayor Dukes.
No problem.
Okay, and listen up, Mayor Lamb. This is the same question for you. Why is being involved in the Regional Transit Authority Task Force important to your cities? And why is it beneficial to your community specifically and not just Oklahoma City's core? Mayor Dukes?
Well, as you know, on our southern border, we have the largest employer in the state of Oklahoma, which increases our population about 30,000 every day. A lot of those come in from Guthrie, Edmond, Shawnee, and it goes right with reducing the amount of cars we have. If we had a viable light rail or commuter rail system in place, it'd go a long way in reducing a lot of the issues we're seeing now. And as far as the community, everybody that I talk to is excited about hearing about a light rail or a commuter rail system in our community, and it would just add quality of life to our citizens, and that's what it's all about. Right now, we work well with EMBARK in providing a Route 19 through our city. We continue to improve on that in the times, but we need, this conversation should have happened 30 years ago, but now that we're having it, we're excited about pushing forward, and Milwaukee is going to be a big player in the overall scope of things.
Well, at least it's good to have the conversation, and you should always have it, and never too late, because
Absolutely.
Austin was way too late, and we've learned that in our intercity visits. So
Absolutely.
great, appreciate it. Mayor Lamb?
We've had success with with our current program. It's costing us about $1 million a year to subsidize it, though. We feel, though, that, and we have provisions made, that if an RTA, the rail can be provided, our downtown will explode with the kind of residential customer that wants that lifestyle, but doesn't necessarily want to be in Oklahoma City, would like to still be around the university campus in the downtown Edmond. So we're making provisions to be ready for that. I find it interesting as a historian that was how Edmond was served early on, because Broadway lays in the corridor that it lays because that's where the interurban went.
Really?
Yes. So we're coming full circle. But we're prepared and excited about the prospect. I think some of the issues that John has described are still remain to be sold to the public. But I believe that there is a place for Edmond for sure, because we've already demonstrated we have ridership.
Wow. History does repeat itself, doesn't it? Yeah. Wow. Jason, how has EMBARK adapted service to match customer needs recently? And how have those changes been received? I mean, you alluded to night ridership. What else?
Okay. Well, you know, we certainly recognize more expectations for public transportation within our community. We recognize that improvements in our core services, such as bus, are certainly something that we've addressed. We're also planning to meet expectations in terms of introducing more transit options, multiple modes, if you will. And so I think, you know, probably the most notable example of how we've kind of met our customer expectations is really some of the improvements we've done with our bus system. And, you know, specifically 3 things, you know, frequency, real-time bus arrival information, and the addition of covered bus shelters. And I say that because, you know, when we do our surveys and we get our results back and we're trying to understand what are some of the barriers to people using public transportation, one of the things we hear a lot about is the community seems to think, well, it just takes too long for me to accomplish my trip by taking the bus, or the bus doesn't come by my location very often. And that certainly was probably the case when we had buses on 80-minute frequency at times, but now we're running 30-minute frequencies on almost all routes. So the maximum, you know, a person is going to wait is 30 minutes. So we've made some improvements, I think, there. Also, what we're learning from the industry is there's a lot of expectation for technology, particularly AVL technology, and the ability for users or customers of the system to know exactly when their ride's going to be there. And we've implemented that technology. So anyone using our bus system today now can use their mobile phone and receive an alert based on GPS positioning and technology as to when that next bus is going to arrive at their stop. And actually, the next 2 buses.
Uber buses, huh?
Pardon me?
Uber buses, right?
Yes, something like that.
Yeah.
So it's really good technology, and that's what we're learning the industry wants, is they don't necessarily care so much anymore about the schedule, although it's certainly important to us. They just want to know, when's the next ride going to be there? And so we've implemented that technology. And then again, understanding expectations of our community. One of the barriers, one of the things we hear that people think about when they decide whether or not to use public transportation is, am I going to have protection from the elements when I'm waiting for the bus? And we had a great conversation at the table, Mayor, about additional bus shelters that Midwest City's looking at. And that's exactly the case for us. We've more than doubled the number of covered shelters that we have on our system. So I think we are meeting some expectations. At the same time, we know not everyone is going to ride a bus. So what are other modes that we can introduce? We've talked about the streetcar. I think I've had an opportunity once to talk about our new rideshare program, which is basically a program. We work primarily through employers where EMBARK provides a Chevy Traverse SUV. We take care of the fuel and the maintenance, and then we just need participants to use those vehicles, basically for a carpooling effort. So we have 2 of those in existence today, essentially taking 10 single occupancy vehicles off of the road that would normally be on the streets during the commute. So I think those are some examples, I think, of us meeting expectations. Most excited, obviously, about the streetcar. I think we're only getting ready for expectations. Once people try the streetcar and they realize how valuable that service can be to getting around, I think we're going to see more expectations for more streetcar, expanded areas for streetcars. So looking forward to actually meeting those expectations.
Cool. Well, Jason, I think you have alluded to it in your previous answer, but talk about just kind of the demystifying, if you will, of the perception of bus ridership and how it's been enhanced in the last few years. Any other things you'd like to add to that discussion?
Well, again, I think I would just encourage everyone to familiarize yourself with the EMBARK bus system. Seriously consider the bus system as a viable transit option. I mean, all you have to do is try it. It's $1.75 for one trip, probably less than what most people would pay to drive to and from work. But then also, again, the other modes that we offer. I think when the streetcar is launched in 2 years, I hope to see everybody in this room be able to take advantage of that system. And I think it will be enlightening to what public transportation can be in our community.
Cool. It's interesting, just the dynamics of when you know that it will be there, you can rely on it, and it's a very pleasurable experience. But yes, we're all excited about the streetcar. You're going to be the first one to get on it, Willa? Okay. All right. Willa wants first spot. Okay.
Okay.
John, I'm directing this question back to you. Mayors, you'll get to talk again, I promise.
No problem.
Okay. How might the service area expand as we implement some of the solutions? And will we see connections from Will Rogers World Airport or some of the western suburbs? And would this lead to a true downtown to downtown connection between Oklahoma City and Tulsa?
Good questions. Yes, under the fixed guideway study and the commuter corridor study, there were items in there in regards to bus rapid transit, which Jason's talked about already. And those routes are more centered on the west side of the metro. For example, one of the routes is up Classen Northwest Expressway out to about Morgan Road. One is from downtown going west on Reno to just about Yukon. One is on 59th Street going west from the Crossroads Mall area to the airport and the FAA. And another one is on Meridian from Reno down to the airport. So a lot of these interconnect, which allows transfers, and that gets interfaced with the bus system. So there's a lot more traffic going on in those particular places. One of the things that has been discussed is transit-oriented development. So in these areas where you have these intersections where you have multiple bus routes or a train station available, that area gets a little bit more attention to detail in regards to land uses. And what you really want there is type of a mixed-use development. So you have a mixture of residential, retail, maybe your doctor's office, maybe a hairdresser, maybe your coffee shop, those types of things whereby someone doesn't necessarily have to take a trip but can get a lot of things done at the same place. But there are choices in our process so far that we discussed in regards to adding on additional areas to the current district that's being talked about. And I probably need to touch on that in that we looked at a county model, a city model, and then a district model for developing like a footprint of maybe a taxing area and a service area. And currently we're really looking at a district model because it can be built up from voting precincts. And that can be modified and changed based on the interest of the people. So it may be like the city of Yukon may say, we want to join in on this, or it could be a portion of Yukon would want to join in on this, and then you would have a vote. They would have a vote to decide if they want to join.
Interesting. I could see those little hubs of taking care of all your services, even dry cleaning, everything. It'd be all, wow, that'd be, how many would be planned?
There would be a number, obviously. One, you've got all the train stations, but then all the intersections on the BRTs, and then maybe some of your bigger transit hubs, and possibly near where major employers are, so you have a number of folks there.
Interesting. See the possibilities. Thank you, John. Okay, I promise y'all will get to talk again.
You're fine.
Jason, how can the west side of Oklahoma City be served by something other than fixed guideways? And is there a potential bus solution?
Yeah, I think it's exactly what John was referencing, and it goes back to that fixed guideway plan and the bus rapid transit corridors that were proposed, at least 4, all serving the west side of Oklahoma City. And again, the one that we're the furthest along on is what we're calling the Northwest Corridor concept plan, and that is Classen to Northwest Expressway on out to the Meridian Council, and the plan actually calls eventually out to the Turnpike. So we are actually on our second round of study on that corridor. So there are solutions. It's bus rapid transit.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Dukes, Mayor Lamb, what lessons can we learn from other cities on how to implement this? And are there any cities that serve as a cautionary tale if we do not address regional transit very soon?
Well, the one that I'm most familiar with is St. Louis's system. It's they utilized current or existing railway right-of-ways, and it takes in account Scott Air Force Base, takes them all the way to Lambert Field, as we were talking about, different. And it's a very nice system, for lack of a better term. It seems to be well operated, and the trains run on time. I think if you look at any of the metro areas that in our area, like Dallas, or even going out to San Diego, or some of the larger towns that have put this or kicked this can down the road, and now they're trying to catch up. There's a lot of lessons to be learned, and I think you mentioned Austin is one that is kind of dealing with some of those issues. Dallas had to come back and retrofit the Dallas system. So if we get ahead of this and we preserve our rail right-of-ways, in which we're doing so in Midwest City right now, and keep those intact so we can move forward with a light rail or a commuter rail system, whatever we're going to end up with, then we could be ahead of the game. But if we allow encroachment to take over those railways and we lose them, then we're going to be like Dallas and some of the other larger cities and trying to backtrack and redo that. So staying ahead of the game right now is the best play.
You bet. Thank you. Mayor Lamb?
Well, a small bit of disclaimer in that the representatives that serve Edmond on the RTA are not here. I am. They're in Europe, enjoying mass transit over there. But
we appreciate your sacrifice.
I do appreciate what the mayor expressed, and I have ridden on systems in other places, but to express comparative information, I can't do that. I can say, though, that Edmond has been in the public transportation business for quite some time. We're also installing fixed bus stops to reduce the impact on our local traffic when the bus would stop and pick people up. So this will improve the character of the service, because they'll know where to be picked up, and reduce some of the friction that we were getting when the bus would just stop. But we have downtown, we have retained land ownership where we would put a transit hub, and it's near where the CityLink hub works now. So we're staying prepared for the opportunity to be connected into the metro. And as I've already expressed, our citizens already ride a lot of the express run, and the university traffic is also to take pressure off the parking problem that we hear a lot about in Edmond. If you've been on UCO's campus, they're taking parking lot into buildings, and there's not much parking lot left. So for us, transit's an absolute. It's making sure that it's viable, and we provide a free service. And part of that is to build ridership, and it's becoming a very effective tool for us. So we're trying to stay ready for whatever evolves out of the discussions that are occurring within the RTA, because I think it'll benefit Edmond greatly now and into the future.
Absolutely. Thank you. John, you're up. What are the next steps to actually creating the RTA? What kind of taxing authority, and will a regional transit authority, what will it have in terms of its authority, and how will we pay for those services? This question keeps going. Will other cities have the opportunity to join the RTA once they see the benefits of the regional transit? And tell us about the consultant you just hired and how that process will go and what he or she is supposed to do, et cetera. Bottom line, what are the next steps after that?
4 questions there?
This is a thesis of a question.
I can start out with clarifying a little bit. We have sent out an RFP, and we've had some questions from some consultants that are interested in taking on this work. This Friday is the deadline for them to send in their bids to us. So we're waiting for that. At that point, our task force, our Regional Transit Authority task force, will be reviewing the bids that come in and the work that they will be looking at. So that will probably take a little bit of time this summer to review that. But we would hope to have somebody on board later this summer so that we can work on this process to take us to the RTA and actually creating that. We're not there yet, and that's our next step in the process. So obviously this will take some legal work, and obviously one of the consultants that comes on board will have some sort of legal representation to get us to that point. We discussed this with other regional or metros around the country and asked them about what they've done. So that's how we kind of sculptured the RFP to kind of get us to that last piece. And we've had really good cooperation from our cities in regards to going forward with that. And that's been very helpful up to this point, and it's just kind of getting it to that point. They will also give us a plan of how to take it from that organization to actually having a vote and getting going and getting the process on the ground. And we have to probably face the fact that you may or may not get it on the first vote that you have of the people. There'll have to be a lot of education and marketing involved to explain this to everyone here.
Words to I love marketing, yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, anything else,
No,
John?
that's fine.
Okay, well, appreciate it. Sure. I tell you, I've asked a bunch of questions. There's got to be more questions out in the audience. So I'd like to turn over to you all. There are no dumb questions, but if you will, just raise your hand, and then someone with the microphone will come and address you. Okay, come on. Willa, come on up front. Jennifer, we got Willa up front. In the beautiful yellow. Why don't you stand so we can all see you? Okay, well then don't.
So, okay. I hear so much about the Western Corridor. And of course, I live east. I see the river going west. I see commercial going west. I see housing going west. But we don't mention east. Is there a plan in the world ever for somebody to think about the east of Oklahoma City?
Yes, ma'am. And I'm their spokesperson. And we've had this discussion, a vibrant discussion in our panel about keeping Tinker in the loop and keeping eastern Oklahoma County in the loop as far as any consideration for regional transit. And we want to expand on that. But you do have a cheerleader, and we will and it's not, they're not forgetting about the east side. They're not. It has been included in every one of our discussions, and there'll be a loop that services our communities
as well as the western side as well. Yes, ma'am.
Most of your riders live east. I mean, you know, how do you get folks to your businesses to do your work?
Jason?
Might mention that, one of the recommendations in the fixed guideway plan, of course, is an enhanced bus network. And the experts have weighed in, the RTA task force has had some discussion. We all understand that for any type of regional transit to be successful, you have to have an enhanced bus network. That's basically the backbone. And so when you enhance the overall bus system, that is, that'll cover all areas of the city. And so trying to put that enhanced bus out there so that everyone within the community or the Oklahoma City area can make those connections to some of these bus rapid transit routes, to some of these eventual commuter corridors, that's really the goal of the plan, and that's the focus that we've had as we've worked to this point.
Thank you.
Willa said, thank you, she hopes she lives long enough to see it. Of course you are. Okay. Other questions? Oh, I'm sorry. Michael, come. Oh, I tell you what, the microphone's over here. Michael, you'll be up next, okay?
I wanted to ask Jason to expand a little bit on bus rapid transit. Tulsa voted this in, Jason. And the BRT there, bus rapid transit, is the technology where the driver has some control over the street lights and is able to turn those green, I guess, and just keep going. Is that the kind of technology you're looking at here? Because it takes several forms. What do you see at bus rapid transit in Oklahoma City? Exactly what it'll be.
So thanks for the question. There are, there's different ways to approach bus rapid transit, all the way from running a bus in regular mixed traffic to completely having it in a dedicated right-of-way. And with our conceptual plan, we've kind of looked at, options for both in different pieces of the corridor. But what you're describing is signal prioritization, and that would have to be part of a successful bus rapid transit corridor. In fact, I would like to think that with all the technology that we have today, if we're fortunate enough to be able to move forward on a bus rapid transit, that we can leverage technology to gain a lot of those efficiencies that what maybe 10 years ago you had to have a dedicated right-of-way to accomplish. So that's really been kind of the goal to this point, is to certainly leverage technology to the fullest extent and minimize dedicated right-of-way.
Michael?
Okay, am I on? Okay,
You're on.
So my question is a continuation of Wilma's question about the east of Oklahoma City. What time frame are we talking about when we're going to be able to service that area? And are there factors, problems that you guys are having focusing that area?
So we as you know, we already have several bus routes that serve the east portion of Oklahoma City. What I would probably direct us to in terms of what we might be able to accomplish in the nearer term than, say, full regional transit and implementation of the fixed guideway study is really continuing to work the transit system analysis that that the Central Oklahoma Transportation and Parking Authority commissioned a few years ago. And that was really looking at our existing bus system, trying to determine how to maximize it. And our plan, working through that analysis, we've implemented a lot of the components, but we know we still have components to go. Two of the things that we really are kind of next on our list when resources are available is additional night service and weekends. In fact, Route 22, serving that portion of the city, is one of probably the next primary route we would consider for night service and extended service on the weekends. So we're certainly mindful of it. And we have, what I like to say, kind of that interim plan we're going to continue to work on, and even enhancing our existing bus system before we get to the full fixed guideway study.
Okay. All right, next question.
Hi, I'm always curious what you all are doing to get rider feedback. How are you soliciting the feedback from the customer in the plans that you're making and the stuff that you're going to do in the future?
Jason, you want to address that?
Sure, I can take that. Thank you for the question. So we really use a multi-pronged approach. First of all, we have a lot of community meetings. In fact, 2 weeks ago, we held focus groups with non-riders to help us understand transit needs. A week or two prior to that, we had some consultants in town where we did some listening sessions to find out what the community would like to see in a new fare structure, thinking of integrating streetcar and multiple modes in the future. We also do a non-rider survey every other year. It's a scientific study survey conducted by the ETC Institute. So those are the kinds of tools that we use for feedback, in addition to just social media and our EMBARK app.
I'll add to that a little bit also.
Please.
I know with our commuter corridor study, and then also with our 30-year plan that we do every 5 years, we ask those same questions of the public in general, and transit always comes back as a very high wish for the local population. So it's been on our radar for some time, and it's good that it's very strong. There's obviously a lot of demand for it.
Mayor Lamb, do you survey your riders?
Well, we survey the community with a satisfaction survey every 2 years, with traffic showing up as a top issue. And as we evaluated the in-depth issue of what they meant by traffic, we've identified intersections and so forth that needed to be upgraded. But inside the general commuter or customer satisfaction survey are questions related to transit and so forth, general questions that we're asking of the public related to whether they use the service or not. We held numerous meetings when the studies were being performed inside the Edmond chamber and brought in the general public as well. And the transportation committee is made up of citizens. So in Edmond, we do an awful lot of interacting with the citizens. Some of that is through social media as well. But it's a dynamic, as John just described, that there's a lot of wish and there is some use, but there really isn't anything for them to take advantage of yet, but there's a lot of desire. We'll find out what the real passion is when we put money on the table or a tax or a fee structure. That's when you're going to really test the waters in the public opinion.
Okay. Question in the back.
Good afternoon. Appreciate you guys being here. This has been very informative. My question is primarily for the mayors, but open to anyone. What we've seen in a number of other cities, Dallas, Denver, others, whenever a regional transit district is developed, especially for fixed guideways, so light rail or commuter rail, those corridors are very large, very cost prohibitive, and it takes a number of years to establish a corridor, to get it through the environmental engineering, get the financing in place, and get it constructed to ridership. And it may be 10 years to get a corridor developed. Maybe that's too long, I don't know for sure. What strategies are you guys looking at? For example, say the first corridor, if it's downtown Oklahoma City to Norman, what strategies are you guys looking at to build consensus within your communities to continue funding the system if it's 10, 15 years until one of those lines comes to Edmond or Midwest City?
One of the things we're doing in Midwest City, as I alluded to earlier, was that we're preserving those right-of-ways so they don't go away. And that's one of your biggest costs, is going back after those right-of-ways and establishing them. We have 2 right-of-ways that go through Midwest City, old railways that are no longer in use, and one is still currently in use, but we're preserving those so encroachment and other things do not take those over. So that would be one strategy. As far as communicating with our citizens, like I alluded to again earlier, all the groups that I talk to are very enthusiastic about supporting a regional transit system such as we're talking about. So we maintain contact, and we do have skin in the game. We have $88,000 dedicated in our budget this year toward the RTA, which primarily just funds the studies that we're doing now, and we will continue to fund that. And then once we identify a larger funding source, as you
said, it's going to be a lot of money, and we're going to have to identify those sources as well. And that's what the RTA is working on right now, is to identify those funding issues and get them in place now. But the enthusiasm is overwhelming, everybody I talk to.
To be honest, right-of-way acquisitions for any major project are a political nightmare. And if you're familiar with the Outer Loop Highway project and the uprising of Not in My Backyard that occurs, one of the things that we talked about in the numerous meetings we had at the RTA was using the existing corridor that's already in place for where the Santa Fe runs, but having to spend the investment for the double track and the infrastructure for the bridges and overpasses and so forth. That's where our expense will be. It's not nearly the same challenge raising money for that as it would be to buy the land to build a different right-of-way. So that was one of the selling points in our conversation, and that's where I circle back to the history. That's how Edmond was connected to the Metro in the beginning. Not necessarily on the Burlington, but adjacent to the Burlington. So I believe the potential for Edmond is that we're not having to do the right-of-way fight. It will make a change in the dynamic of the way that right-of-way and the adjacent land uses develop, but we're holding, in Edmond, we're holding certain parts of that in hope of the future that we can see development occur in a positive way around the railroad itself or the tracks itself. We're actually initiating what Oklahoma City has already done in the quiet zone study related to the downtown corridor. We have two issues. One is the whistles, they're such a frequent. The other is the dead trains while they're waiting for one to pass, because we're already double tracked in downtown Edmond. But those delayed trains are really becoming a headache for east-west traffic. So we would like to see it accelerate a little because it might reduce some of that challenge. But the right-of-way challenge is one where we think we can avoid, at least as far as Edmond's concerned.
Okay. Question here.
Will changing technologies address congestion issues without us having to invest in regional transit in regards to self-driving cars and the emerging technologies?
Can I respond?
Yes.
In Edmond, we've already started investing in what we call ITS, where we can schedule the lights to address the flow of traffic. And part of that's because of the traffic volume we have on Second, university population coming and going. So there is technology that we're rolling out now, but I would personally say that a driverless car or an automotive car is still a car. And so you still got four wheels on the road. So I'm not sure that's an answer of itself. Might be if you're on the interstate where you can read a book while it's going down the road. But as a motorcycle rider, it terrifies me that these cars would be out there and I can't see the driver's eyes. But ITS is one of the ways that we're addressing traffic flow in Edmond, and we have an academic component of that with the student population. And Second Street was our first phase, and we've finally got it closed out, and we have a north-south corridor now that we're waiting on the Department of Transportation to get back to building projects at this point.
There are some technological advances that we'll have to make here in our communities before we can really get there. One of the things that you've probably heard about is obviously they have a lot of cameras on these cars and they're looking for things. So all your signage in your city would have to be very, very up-to-date and clean and easy to read. Your crosswalks would have to be painted. Your stop signs and your stop lines at intersections would have to be updated more regularly, most likely. I think the ITS component, the connection between communities would have to be upgraded a little bit. A lot of cities are actually doing their own systems at this point. But in order to integrate them, we still need a little bit of work to get there. The other issue with automated vehicles is weather conditions. And for the most part in Oklahoma, we're pretty good. But they have some issues when we get really torrential rains, snow, and other weather issues like that. The cameras don't work quite so well. So I'm sure over time they will get better at that. So it's maybe a little further down the road than maybe we think.
That's scary. Driverless cars with the snow.
Yes.
Stay off the roads. Mayor Dukes, did you have a comment?
No, I was just going to piggyback on what Mayor Lamb. We have that system in place as well in Midwest City, and we monitor our traffic flow and adjust our times accordingly. We also have a system in place, and I'm sure other metro areas have it, is the Opticon system for our emergency vehicles. And there's a light that is transmitted to the signal light that tells them that an emergency vehicle is coming through the intersection. It changes all the lights red. Well, that would piggyback into what Jason was talking about on the rapid bus transit issue. We could outfit or retrofit the buses with the same technology and allow them to go through the intersection and increase their or decrease the time that they're traveling through their route. So there's all kinds of technology and possibilities out there, and most of us have already got it in place.
I could add maybe a perspective from a transit provider. Is my mic on?
It's on now.
I don't think anybody obviously really knows all the implications of autonomous vehicles, but I do know in transit, one of the biggest problems that we have to solve, and we continue to look for ways to solve it, is the whole first mile and last mile, right? How do you get from where you're at to that transit line? And autonomous vehicles, they might be the solution for that. So looking on the bright side of things, I could see that as potentially making transit more attractive to some, because the first mile, last mile problem could be solved by autonomous vehicles.
Maybe park and rides also?
Maybe park and rides as well? Okay. Wow. Question over here.
Hi there. My question's pretty simple. For the streetcar program, what's the time frame that it's going to run? And do you guys foresee any safety concerns if it's running in the downtown area pretty late at night, especially in the Bricktown area?
What are you implying?
I work downtown.
Okay.
So as long as you're committing to riding the streetcar, then that's great. Let me talk about that just quickly. As far as the operation hours or when the streetcar will provide service, keep in mind, I can give you a general idea. Our Board of Trustees, working with City Council, will actually determine the final service span. But essentially what we're looking at is very early in the morning, 6 a.m. To midnight, Monday through Thursday. Friday and Saturday, we would run streetcars until about 2 a.m. and then looking at some special event service as well. Keep in mind, with the streetcar, you're going to have frequency between 12 and 14 minutes, so that's about how long you're going to have to wait on a vehicle to arrive if you just missed it. And there's 22 stops throughout downtown, so lots of accessibility to be able to ride the streetcar. As far as safety goes, safety is paramount. Safety is at the top of our list in all of our transit operations. But for streetcar in particular, we're already currently in the process of drafting our safety plans. We'll be working with the State Safety Oversight Office along with the FTA. And these are organizations or entities that have set up these systems in other places across the country, and we'll make sure we comply with best practices and their recommendations.
Okay, we have two final questions.
My question is regarding if employers use flex time or allow people to work from home, how would that affect traffic congestion if you could, spread out the peak that way?
I'll have a go at that. Thanks, Ken. One of the issues I think there is that I think we already have some flex time. I know a lot of companies have the ability to let their employees come in a little late or leave a little late. And I think that's probably what's happening in regards to the PM peak. It's starting to stretch a little bit because some people wait a little later. I know I've done this a few times. If you wait till after 6, maybe you can get out of here a little easier than you could before that time. But it seems to me there seems to be waves of folk that seem to come out of Oklahoma City. It's like the 4 to 4:30 to 5 to 5:30 to 6. And so somehow if you get in about 15 minutes after that, you may have a little window of opportunity. But I do think the flexing of work is a plus. I know at one time ODOT was doing 5 days and 4 days, so you would work extra hours, and then on the last Friday you would get off. That would take some people off the system, but we probably have a long way to go in regards to that. Now, if more businesses allow their workers to work from home a little bit, that would probably help as well, but you need a lot of folks to do that, and I don't know if we're going to move the dial very far.
One final question? No? Okay. You know, we have a lot to consider as we're moving our plans, our regional transit plans forward, but let's give a round of applause to our panelists for their great ideas. Thank you so much for being here today, and again, let's thank our key signature sponsor, Cox Business, our series, yes. The Cox people led that applause. Okay, our series corporate sponsors, ADG Inc. and Guernsey. Okay, they need. And our host sponsor, and for the meal today, Embassy Suites, Oklahoma City Downtown Medical Center. Thank you all for your time. It's going to be flex time to leave out of here. So what time do they start, John?
Like 5 minutes.
5 minutes, okay, all right. So everybody, just take your time. Thank you so much. Have a good one. Appreciate it. Thank you.
I don't know. And